What do we hold on to when the ground shifts? This is the question that I return to again and again when life feels uncertain. When grief shows up at the door uninvited, when plans fall apart, when headlines overwhelm, or when something just doesn't go the way I hoped. It's the question that echoes in my chest when a season of life ends before I'm ready, or when a new beginning arrives and I don't yet know how to greet it. In a world full of change, full of loss, transition, and upheaval, it's a question that returns. Sometimes it's whispered, sometimes it's shouted, but it's always close. What do we hold on to when the ground moves? When the job ends, the relationship breaks, the city changes, the world shifts shape? What do we reach for when the steady path dissolves beneath our feet? We are living in a time of great motion, a time of planetary change, communal upheaval, personal turning points. We're moving through griefs old and new. We're navigating transitions we never expected and holding on to relationships and routines and rituals that sometimes feel like they're slipping through our fingers. And in the midst of all that motion, we long for grounding, for something real, for a steady place to land. I used to believe that solid ground was possible. I thought that if I could just plan carefully enough or prepare well enough, hold tightly enough, I could secure something unshakable beneath me. But then I discovered the edge of the world. And I remember the first time that happened, that time quite literally. It was my senior year of high school, and my final year in the youth group at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Corvallis, Oregon. And every autumn, we would spend a weekend at the Oregon coast, sharing stories and s'mores until the sun went down over the ocean. And one night, a group of us decided that we wanted to go down to the beach. It was 10, maybe 11 p.m., and the rest of the campsites were silent and empty. We took the winding trail through the beach grass, the boardwalk slowly disintegrating into sand beneath our feet, laughing and talking loudly, knowing that there was no one around to make us quiet down. But suddenly, just out of our own accord, we all fell silent. We had arrived at the top of the trail, on a sand dune that gave way to the shoreline. We stood in speechless awe of the transcendent beauty in front of us. The moon was nearly full, enough that we could see its reflection on the gentle waves. And for one long moment, suspended in time, none of us said a word. Now, we were high schoolers, so the moment was soon broken, as a few of my friends leapt off the path and into the sand dune, shrieking wildly as their feet carried them to the water. And I followed them down, feeling the cries escape from my body and disappear into the great nothingness that surrounded us. When I got to the bottom of the dune, my lungs burned from the exhaustion, from the combination of running and shouting, and I paused to catch my breath. Exhausted, I gasped for air, looking around as I adjusted to the shift in surroundings from the top of the dune to the water's edge. And besides my small youth group, there were no signs of human life or even human influence besides a distant lighthouse and a faraway ship. The sand was smooth, newly washed in with the tide, and the beach grass obscured any houses that could have been lining the shores. As I fastened my attention to the sound of the waves crashing on the beach, my friends' voices faded into the background. My breath just returning to my tired body caught in my throat as I looked out at the ocean. As far as I could see in the dusty moonlight, the waves of the ocean rolled on. And even though science told me it was just because of the curvature of the earth, at that moment I felt like I was witnessing the edge of the world. I grew up an hour from the Pacific, spending summers and weekends and youth group retreats playing in the freezing waves. But I had never felt like I was on the edge of the world. I had never felt any urgency to connect with the ocean because it was always there, just an hour's drive away from home. Sometimes the most grounding place, the most connecting thing is something you already know. But it's surprising how easy it is to forget that. About a year after that retreat, I started college on the other side of the country in eastern Massachusetts. I was excited, nervous, hopeful. One of the reasons that I had chosen Wellesley was that the campus, especially the beautiful Lake Waban, was bordering the grounds, making it just the most beautiful place on earth. And I imagined myself walking around that lake daily, reading beside it, sitting in stillness and wonder. But anyone who has been a freshman in college knows that life gets busy. Classes piled up, deadlines loomed, and the lake was always there. I could see it from the library, from my dorm room, on my walk to class. And so I told myself, I'll walk around it tomorrow. There's time. But then March of 2020 came. My phone buzzed with the news that I'd been dreading, but somehow still didn't expect, that my school was closing due to COVID-19. We had 4 days to pack up and leave. I cried. My friends cried. We hugged and cried some more. We booked flights. We donated piles of things. We said rushed goodbyes. And finally, in between that chaos, I kept sneaking away to the lake. I sat with my guitar and I played aimlessly. I found a tree stump that jutted over the water and let my feet dangle above the ripples. I watched the wind dance across the surface. I listened. I let the water hold me in silence. For all those months I thought that I had, I never made time for the lake until time ran out. And then I made space for it every moment I could. In times of change, we return to what grounds us. It's not always something new, but rather something already known, something that we were waiting for all along. Because even when the ground shifts, even when the path disappears, something steady remains. And sometimes the most steady thing of all is water itself. Now, so much has changed since those early years. 5 years have passed. The pandemic began and continues, and we have too. I moved down to New York to begin seminary, and here I am finally with graduation and ordination still distant but visible. And the waters I've known and loved have shifted just like I have. I still carry Oregon with me, quite literally. There's a tattoo of the river that I grew up winding beside me on my forearm. The Willamette, with its grassy banks and clear ripples, shaped me just as much as the Pacific Ocean, if not more. It taught me that it would always be there, even when the waters flowed or ebbed, when its path shifted with erosion and new life. And these days, it's not the Willamette that I greet, but the East River, just blocks away from my apartment here in the city. And the rivers of New York are pretty different than the ones I grew up with in Oregon. They're not quiet or clear. They don't wind for miles through silent forests or rush down from the clear streams of a mountaintop. They hum and churn with energy, reminding us that this city is part of something much larger than itself. And just last week, I spent time on Star Island off the coast of New Hampshire at a week-long conference for Unitarian Universalist faith development. And I stood on the edge of that rocky shore, the wind whipping through my hair, and I felt the spray on my skin. I watched the waves of the Atlantic crash and roll and breathe. My partner and I took a small paddle boat out into the open water, realizing only after we'd made our way out there that the sea was much stronger than it looked from shore. Years later, across a continent, a different ocean, but yet again, I felt like I was on the edge of the world. I felt the earth in motion. And that's the paradox, isn't it? That we long for something that's solid when the world is spinning, but sometimes what holds us isn't solid at all. Sometimes it's not a foundation, but a rhythm, a tide, a breath, a memory, a promise, a prayer. Sometimes it's the very motion itself that reminds us that we belong. And I think there's something deeply freeing in that. The realization that we don't have to resist the change, that we don't have to cling to the shore, that the motion itself might be sacred. I think of all of the wisdom traditions that speak of flowing water, of clouds that move, of breath that comes and goes. I think of the Hebrew prophet Amos calling for justice to roll down like waters. I think of the Buddhist teachings on impermanence and the river of life in Taoist thought. I think of Jesus walking beside the Sea of Galilee, gathering followers not with doctrine, but with stories told in the rhythm of waves. I think of Octavia Butler, one of our great prophets. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And of course, I think of Unitarian Universalism, a faith not built on creeds, but on covenants, on promises that we make and remake, on movement and transformation, on the sacredness of change. We are people of motion, not chaos, not restlessness, but purposeful, faithful, loving motion. Motion towards justice, towards compassion, toward each other. Motion inward and outward and onward. And in motion we find interdependence. We learn that we are not alone, that our thriving is bound up in each other's and in the health of the earth, that none of us are truly free until all of us are free. In motion, we find liberation, not the kind promised by consumerism or individualism, but the kind that comes through community, through deep listening, through struggle and joy. Octavia Butler tells us that God is change. And I'm here telling you that I've learned change from the water. And water has taught me so much about God. Tsunamis and floods destroy cities, displace families, reshape coastlines. But we don't blame the water. The water isn't trying to punish or reward. The water does not moralize. It simply is. It moves with force, with rhythm, sometimes with inevitability. And when water disappears, when droughts leave the land parched, when crops fail and thirst sets in, we don't believe it's because water has judged us unworthy. We know that water does not withhold itself out of spite. It simply follows the conditions of the world around us. It responds to what is. I think God, like water, is not a being we appease, but a force we live with, a presence we are a part of, a mystery that we are immersed in. Water is life-giving. When it flows freely, it nourishes. When it is honored and protected, everything changes. Life emerges, green things grow, bodies are healed, spirits are calmed. Our planet is mostly water. Water is always around us, whether we can see it or not. Water is with us when we cry for sorrow and when we cry for joy. It's with us when we salivate over a delicious meal. It's with us through water balloons and sprinklers in the summer and hot tea and snowballs in the winter. It's the first thing we know and the last thing we reach for. Water courses through our bodies, yours and mine. We would be nothing without water. Maybe that's why each year so many Unitarian Universalist communities return to the ritual of water communion, bringing waters from places of travel or transition or meaning. We pour them together as a reminder that our journeys may be different, but we are still connected, that our lives, like water, are made to meet. Water doesn't ask us to believe in it. It simply is. And still, it sustains us. So if there is a God that I trust, it is one who moves like water, not distant or above, but intimate, responsive, present, showing up in the real everyday currents of our lives, just in the way water does, in our bodies, in our breath, in the world around us. So this is where the water leads us. If God is change and our faith is rooted in motion, then we are being invited into a different kind of spiritual grounding, one that moves, that grows, that transforms. And isn't that what our time demands? Not a faith that is still, but one that adapts, that listens. The world is changing. Climate change, political upheaval, rising tides, both literally and metaphorically. And Unitarian Universalism is changing too. We're centering interdependence, equity, transformation. We're embracing change not as a threat, but as a truth, as a calling. To be a Unitarian Universalist today is to be in motion, to trust the water, to go where love leads. So when, not if, but when, the solid ground you believed in crumbles, when the plan changes, when the door closes, when the next step is unclear, listen. You already know what brings you peace. You already know what restores your breath. You already know what calls you home. Trust yourself. Listen deeply. You are not alone. And when you arrive at the edge of the world, where the horizon is wide and the wind is strong, may you remember you are a part of something larger. May you find your place in the great unfolding. May you let the blessed motion carry you. Amen.